This is a brief walkthrough of the Child and Adult Care Food Program, or CACFP, Sponsor Food Program Expense Report, which you received as part of your CACFP Administrative Review. Sponsors are required to complete and return this report to the Oregon Department of Education Child Nutrition Programs, ODE-CNP, along with additional required documents listed in the Administrative Review Required Documents checklist. Before we dive into the details of the report, it is important to note that the expenses report should be completed by the staff member involved in accounting for CACFP income and expenses. This may be a controller, a business manager, a financial director, or an accountant. It could also be the same person that is designated as the Food Program Coordinator in CNP Web. Most importantly, it must be the person who will understand and have access to the financial accounting system used to track the receipt and use of CACFP funds. Because this walkthrough is meant for many different types of CACFP sponsors, there may be documents, reports, or terms used that do not apply to your specific organization or accounting system. We've tried to provide a broad definition of what is needed for completing the report, but if there are additional questions after completing this video, please reach out to the child nutrition specialist conducting your administrative review. This video, along with the food program expense report and checklist of required documents, was provided by your reviewing child nutrition specialist. For unannounced reviews, these are provided by the reviewing child nutrition specialist at the start of the administrative review. At the top of the checklist of required documents, you will note your organization's test month and year. Scrolling down to the Validation of Nonprofit Meal Service section, you will again note that the test month and year are listed. This section includes documentation that you will need to gather to complete the expense report and then include in the files submitted for review. The documentation includes reports showing your CACFP fund balance at the end of the month prior to your designated review test month. For instance, if your review test month is listed as April 2021, you will need to determine what the balance of your CACFP funds were on March 31st, 2021. If your organization uses an accounting system such as QuickBooks, you might choose to print your profit and loss by class report. If your organization uses a different accounting software, you will need a report identifying the balance of income and expenses to your CACFP account as of the end of March 2021. If you're unsure what document you will need, contact your reviewing child nutrition specialist to discuss your specific practices and determine the best option. Next, you will need to gather all documentation showing expenses charged during the test month to the CACFP food service operation. This may include itemized food receipts, distributor invoices, rental receipts, timesheets, contractor invoices, or more for all charges to the CACFP during the test month. Next, if your organization receives food or monetary donations that were used for your CACFP food operation, gather documentation detailing this income. Documentation could include receipts with the date of donation and value of products, or invoices detailing the fees charged for donated food items. Finally, the procedure that your organization uses to document CACFP income and expenses. Specifically, how CACFP income is identified and when it is entered into the accounting system, how allowable expenses are identified and when they are entered into the accounting system, and how you will ensure that unallowable costs are not charged to the CACFP. Even though this item is listed last on the checklist, it is probably the most important piece. It is essential to have a written procedure that you and your staff follow when dealing with CACFP funds. This procedure is a guide for your organization, and it should reflect the actual practices followed by your staff. but it also allows ODE C&P to understand and follow your organization's use of these federal funds. With the backup documentation gathered, it's time to complete the expense report. The first tab of the report provides instruction for completing it. Feel free to refer to these instructions as you complete the report. When you open the second tab, the expense report, you will see that your reviewing specialist has completed the test month and year for you on the left-hand side. This is the same test month and year that was listed on your required documents checklist. You will also see that some cells of the spreadsheet have red arrows in the right-hand corner. If you hover your cursor over these cells, it will give you information about what is required in this row or column. At the far upper right corner, enter the name and position of the person completing the report. Starting at the line designated as A, or CACFP balance, you will notice that a date has populated in D5. This date is the last date of the month prior to the test month and will automatically populate when the specialist enters your test month and year. In this case, April 2021 is the test month and year, so in the designated space, you will enter your CACFP fund balance as of March 31st of 2021. This is where your accounting system report of income and expenses comes into play. In the next line down, B, you will enter the reimbursement income received for your test month, in this case, April 2021. Again, you're going to look at your accounting system to determine how much reimbursement that you were paid for the month of April 2021. Keep in mind, this may be different than the amount of reimbursement listed on your April claim. Why? If revisions were made to previously closed claims, it could affect the payment received. If your organization uses USDA foods, you may have fees removed from your reimbursement claim. There are many reasons why your claim may be affected. For this reason, you do not want to use the C&P Web Claim tab to enter this information. You'll use your own accounting system's information of income received, and you may cross-check that information with information listed in C&P Web on the Payments tab. The next line, C, asks for any other income received for CACFP. This will be most important for pricing programs or programs that vend or cater from CACFP. Again, using the documentation from your accounting system, you will enter income for the test month. Now that you've entered all the income received for the test month, the next step is to enter expenses. This is the time to pull out the receipts, invoices, and other expense documentation from the test month. Each of these will be listed and separated by expense category in the CACFP Program Expense Table labeled D. Let's take a moment to walk through the table, which is separated into sections. The columns to the left will provide general information about the expense, the date on the expense document, the method of payment used to pay the expense, such as check, credit card, cash, the name of the vendor or payee, and the total expense listed on the document. From this column, the columns to the right, highlighted in green for operational and blue for administrative, are your expense categories. In the headings listed in row 16, you'll see things like purchased food, food service supplies, labor, contracted services, utilities, etc. The operating expenses, again highlighted in green, are expenses that directly relate to the preparation and service of CACFP meals. The administrative expenses, highlighted in blue, are related to the oversight of the CACFP. A sponsor will need to categorize the expenses for each of the receipts, invoices, timesheets, etc. listed in the table. There is also a column S, for unallowable expenses. It is a sponsor's responsibility at all times to ensure that expenses being charged to the CACFP are allowable. If unallowable costs are listed on the receipt, the sponsor must have a system for noting that unallowable cost and charging it to a different account. Any unallowable costs listed on the documentation for your test month will be listed in column S. Column T is an edit check for the sponsor to ensure that all expenses listed on the receipt have been categorized in one or more columns. The formula in this column simply adds up the expenses listed in column F through S and ensures that it matches the total amount of the receipt in column E. If not, the difference will be noted in red and will need to be listed in an appropriate category. Finally, the last column, column U, is provided to list the number of gallons of milk, if any, purchased on the receipt. This helps reviewers in determining that adequate amounts of milk were purchased depending on the program requirements. As you complete the program expenses table, you will see a number appear and update in the total expenses line of the upper portion of the report. This number will continue to update until all expenses have been listed. Once all expenses have been entered, review the number listed in the line just under the total expenses. This is the balance resulting from your total expenses subtracted from the fund balance and income received. If the number is negative, alternate funds will be required to cover the remaining costs and create a zero balance. The next two lines allow you to enter the type of alternate funds used in line E, for example, unrestricted grant funds, general funds, a savings account, and the dollar amount of those funds in line F. If the number listed in the balance section is a positive number, then the remaining CACFP funds must be rolled over and maintained for future CACFP expenses. So now let's take a quick look at an example of how the report might be used. In this scenario, our test month and year is April 2021. After reviewing our information in our accounting software, we've come to the conclusion that our CACFP fund balance as of 3/31/2021 is $300. As you can see to the right of the screen, we've pulled up our accounting software to show our reimbursement. The reimbursement received based on our information and a cross-check of the Payments tab in CMP Web is $2,428. So we'll enter that in the appropriate spot. Because our program is not a pricing program and we don't vend or cater meals, we don't have any other CACFP income, so we can leave that alone for now. Our next step is to go to our CACFP food program expenses table. We have some receipts, which I'll pull up, and we'll enter those into the table. As you can see to the right, we have a receipt for Walmart. So in our food program expenses table, we'll list the date of the expense, which we'll say for Walmart was 4/1/2021, the method of payment, which was a credit card or CC. Of course, the name of the payee was Walmart. And the total amount of the receipt is $18.61. So now the left-hand portion of the table has been completed. Now we have to categorize our expenses. In looking at the receipt, we have oatmeal, pasta, broccoli with cheese sauce, grape jelly, peanut butter, some pasta sauce, some fruit and vegetables, and some milk and bread. So all of those expenses will be located under purchased food. So we'll put the total amount of $18.61. Because we did purchase a gallon of fat-free milk, we want to make sure that we scroll all the way over to the last column, column U, to put 1 gallon of milk. We'll move on to our next receipt, which is from Costco. This expense was on 4/10/2021 and was paid with a credit card. The total amount of the receipt was $115.72. This receipt, in looking at it, includes food items, but also includes some laundry detergent, which we use to wash our towels from the kitchen, and liquid soap, which we use to wash our dishes. we want to make sure that we categorize them in a different section. These would be considered food service supplies. Another important thing to note on this receipt is that the liquid soap that we purchased was on sale. So we'll want to make sure to remove the rebate from the cost of the item before we calculate and enter it into our spreadsheet. So our $15.99 soap minus our $3.20 savings comes out to $12.79. Adding that to our $12.99 laundry soap, we come out with a total of $25.78 in our food service supplies area. So we'll want to make sure to put that in the column. Now, if you scroll all the way to the right, you'll notice that in the edit check column, we have a red total of $89.94. This means that $89.94 of the total receipt have not yet been categorized, so we'll want to make sure to do that. In looking at the receipt again, everything else listed is a food product, so we can indicate our $89.94 in our purchased food column. Now, when you scroll all the way to the right, you'll see that our edit check column has a 0. On our Costco receipt, we also note that we did purchase 2 gallons of whole milk. So again, we're going to list 2 gallons in our milk column. Another Costco run was done on 4/15/2021 and was paid by a credit card for a total of $200.37. In looking at this receipt, we will note that $12.59 were spent on freezer gallon bags. So we want to make sure to categorize that in our food service supplies again. The remainder, we'll see, again moving to the right, is $187.78. So we want to make sure to put that in our purchased food column. It's important to always make sure that your edit check equals 0. Our final food receipt was purchased on 4/20/2021 and again was paid with a credit card. This was to Grocery Depot for a total of $29.82. In looking at the receipt, you will notice that one of the items is highlighted in yellow and a red NA has been noted next to that item. Depending on what your procedure is at your organization, you will note unallowable expenses in many different ways. In our scenario, our organization's procedure is to highlight the unallowable item and note it with an NA, so that we know that it needs to be charged to other funds and not CACFP food funds. So because we purchased an unallowable item, we'll go to that column first and enter the amount, $1.89. The remainder of $27.93 is for purchased food, so we'll put that in the purchased food column. This food run included several gallons of milk, so we want to make sure that we note that in our milk column. And that is our food receipts for April. We also charge time for one of our employees, John Doe, to the CACFP food program account. So we want to make sure to note that for April as well. Payment was completed on 4/15/2021 by a check. And we'll want to make sure to put John's name under the name of payee. And the total amount received, as you can see in the information to the right, we have Child Nutrition Program hours and deli hours. John works at the deli as well. For the Child Nutrition Program hours for the month of April, John worked 125.83 hours for a total of $1,761.67. So we'll want to make sure that we indicate that in our total amount of receipt as the amount that was paid. Other documentation that you'll want to have to back up this information are individualized timesheets, payroll documentation, and information such as canceled checks showing that the payroll was actually paid to the employee. So because this is labor and John works in our kitchen making CACFP meals, it will go under our operating expenses, and the full amount will go under our labor column. In addition to labor, we also have utilities under our CACFP expense budget. To the right of the screen, you'll see a utilities invoice of $112.42. This was also charged to us on 4/15/2021 and was paid via a credit card to Helena Utilities. The total amount of $112.42 is entered into our total amount of receipt column, and we'll scroll over to utilities under our operating expenses, since these are utilities for our kitchen, and enter the $112.42. Something important to remember is that if costs are shared between programs, such as CACFP and alternate programs like the deli, you will have to have an allocation plan and separate those charges between programs. Because our utility charge here is just for our kitchen, and our kitchen is only going to be used for our CACFP meals, the full amount of the utility bill may be charged to the CACFP fund. We have one more expense to enter for Janitorial Services, and this expense was charged on 4/30/2021, paid by a check, again for Janitorial Services. And on the invoice at the right, you will see that the total was $2,975. These services are for the cleaning of our administrative offices, which are also used for our other programs, and therefore an allocation of the janitorial services must be done. In our calculations, we have determined that 25% of our janitorial services should be charged to the CACFP. So in taking our total invoice and multiplying that by 25%, we come up with $743.75. Because our administrative offices are used for oversight of the program, we're putting these contracted services under administrative expenses in the blue columns. So we'll go ahead and enter our allocated amount of $743.75. The total amount, as we know, was $2,975. And so moving to the right, we'll see that based on our edit check column, $2,231.25 have not been categorized. Because these are going to be charged to other funds, we're going to put them in the unallowable CACFP expenses column. Now our edit check column is a 0. You always want to make sure that the edit check column for each of your items is 0, so that you know that you have categorized all of the expenses within that item. And now moving to the left, we can see in our total food program expenses that our expenses were $2,980.47. In the balance section, just below that, you can see that we have a negative $252.47, which means that we exceeded our fund balance plus income with our expenses. So we know that we need to make our CACFP fund balance whole, and we'll need to do that with other funds. In line E, you can indicate the other funds that will be used to take care of the negative balance and make the CACFP fund whole. So we go back to our account summary and we look at our other revenue sources. You can see here that we do receive some grants for our operations, and for the month we received $500. In addition, we take in rental income. So in line E, we'll indicate that our other sources of funds are grants and rental income. Now in F, we want to go ahead and enter the amount of grants or rental income that we will be using to cover the negative balance. Because we just want to make the CACFP balance whole, we're going to enter $252.47. And now you see that our final balance is $0. It's very important that month to month we are making the CACFP balance whole by ensuring that if we have expended more than we've brought in, that we cover that expense with other funds. As a sponsor, once you're done with your food program expense report, make sure to save it with all other documentation that you're required to send for your administrative review. This report and all required documents will be sent to the child nutrition specialist via secure file transfer. Secure file transfer instructions will be included with the email from your child nutrition specialist. This has been a brief walkthrough of the CACFP Sponsor Food Program Expense Report. If you have additional questions, please reach out to your reviewing child nutrition specialist.